Um, well, that's a tough one to answer. I honestly can't say that I was initially because everything about being gay was negative. In the media, there was no positive media impressions whatsoever. There was no Ellen, no Will and Grace, no nothing to make you feel it was okay. And so even though I grew up in a family that was very, what we called liberal, now we call it progressive, an understanding family, I still never felt that it would be even okay to come out to my parents. So it was a very traumatic thing for me to do, to come out. But once I did come out, it was like waiting to exhale the film, and I exhaled, and my life changed forever from that moment forward. It's, as we say now with transgender people, you're living your authentic self. You're being your authentic life, and it's kind of amazing. And I'm so glad that more people now than before can come out in a safe environment at an earlier age and acknowledge who they truly are earlier in their life, so they can live fully and freely.
And we owe that a lot to the previous generations, and I'm sure you do too. Could you say something about that? Who you think paved your way?
Well, countless people paved my way. You know, it was difficult to come out in the early 70s when I did. But I was even aware at that time, at the fledgling movement that we were, and the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center, because I was born and raised in Los Angeles until I moved to Palm Springs 29 years ago almost. But I knew that there were people before me. There was Jim Kepner, and I knew about the archives, and I knew about the small LA Gay and Lesbian Center that operated out of a little house on Wilshire Boulevard, where I went for my first STD test, terrified. East Wilshire Boulevard, you know, you know, but grateful to know that existed. And so I knew that as tough as it was for me to come out in 1974, it was easier than it was for my predecessors, who really risked life and limb, career, family, their income, their health, everything from the 50s and 60s who did this before. And I owed them a debt of gratitude, and I also felt that the best way I could repay that was to become involved in the movement, in the community, so that those coming after me, the generation or two in the next 10, 20, 30 years after me, would in fact have an easier path as well. And as we look back historically, we can see that they have had that. So it didn't come very early, and it didn't come very easily. It's been a long, slow build, and then bam, everything, thank God, under President Obama, kind of gelled.
Yeah.
Well, before we talk about HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, let's talk about before the Human Rights Campaign. So I just finished my 15th and final year on the board of the Human Rights Campaign, which is a lot longer than I was supposed to be there, but I wasn't ready to lead before. But before that, right here in Palm Springs, my first involvement was with the Desert AIDS Project, which we call DAP. And I did 14 years with Desert AIDS Project. I had moved to Palm Springs, and after 6 months of looking at the mountains and recharging my batteries after a television career in Los Angeles, I decided I now had the time to get involved. In LA, I didn't have the time, but I had some money from my work, so I would write checks. And here, I had more time than money, so I started giving my time. And it started with me answering the front desk telephone as a volunteer, and within less than a year, I was on the board of directors. Wow. and wound up as the president of the board for 4 years, and I was the co-founder of our major giving program called Partners for Life at Desert AIDS Project. I say we because I'm still very, very involved. I'm not in an official capacity, but very much tied and married to the organization because they do exceptional work, not just locally, but they're kind of a national model. So I did that because that was really this was 1989. Wow. 1990 when I went on the board, 89 when I started volunteering with them. And of course, we were still very much in the peak and the height of the AIDS crisis. And when I was in Los Angeles, I actually stopped going to the funerals of my friends because it was just too painful, and I had cried myself out. There's just nothing you can do that. No way to explain it. It's just something that was gut-wrenching and horrific. And of course, in those days, you knew that if you had a test and it came back positive, I gasped for air, because every time I get a test, including today, even though I'm on PrEP, I'm anxious before the results come back. And then it was just really, the first time I got my test, I remember I just broke down in tears. And it was at the LA Gay and Lesbian Center. And the
stigma back then must have been horrendous.
Oh, the stigma was horrible, and it still exists today, although it's just like cancer was 20, 30 years ago. Nobody talked about it then. They didn't talk about HIV, AIDS. Now they're talking about both.
Yeah.
And so I just, so I really felt that my calling was to, again, to, in a sense, a debt of gratitude, because I had escaped the scourge. I don't know why, with all intent, I should be positive, but I'm not. And so I thought I needed to take that blessing and do something with it and help others. And the funny thing is, everybody who were clients who came in and chatted with me at the front desk and everything just assumed I was positive, because why would a negative person be helping in HIV and AIDS? So I've made a lot of lifetime friends. I lost a lot of lifetime friends. My one and only first cousin, come from a tiny family, passed away from AIDS back in the day when it was tough to survive it. And of course, through science and time marching on and a lot of money and a lot of care, we now have ways to make HIV a manageable, almost chronic kind of disease for now, until we stop the infections. So that was my history to that. And about 12 years into Desert AIDS Project, I started thinking about the bigger picture and how AIDS fits in politically. It's not just a health issue, but it's a political issue, and it always has been. But I was thinking more locally, and I wanted to go more globally. So I thought about getting engaged with the Human Rights Campaign, and I did. And through the support and mentorship of a couple of great people over at the coast in Laguna Beach, they had my back, and I got engaged, involved, and I went on their board in 2002, October of 2002. And so I then had, an entirely different
directive.
Yeah, the direction of what I was doing, but still brought my HIV/AIDS leadership background with me. And so it's been an amazing ride. Politics is a very, very difficult road to hoe, as we know, and it's a
major
and challenging again, as we all too well know.
So you must have been ecstatic when gay marriage passed.
Yeah, there's on my bar in the living room, there's a framed thing from HRC to all the board members thanking us for our hand and our role in making that happen. It certainly was not an HRC exclusive victory. It's the movement, but we were a very large instrumental player. Obviously, all the legal advocacy groups like NCLR and Lambda Legal and the ACLU were also instrumental in that, of course, because it had to be tried. We're not a legal advocacy group, but we do have connection, clout, and power. Well, I think it's been really, really amazing. It's almost like gay and lesbian issues are settled in so many people's minds, and the visibility of the transgender issue rose up, bubbled up to the top so quickly that it became the cause célèbre. And I'm glad it did, and it just focused all this attention on it. And like anything, like a gay or lesbian person, coming out is key to winning your victories, both personally and at the ballot box. Because the more people know a gay person, the less likely they are to vote against you
Yeah, exactly.
for a candidate. And the same thing with transgender people. There's so much stigma attached to that many transgender people really just want to live their life.
In stealth. Yeah.
But just live their life quietly and with their friends and not be visible about it, because surviving is a different challenge. And so it's so great that it is visible, that more people are out as transgender and can be their authentic self. And that, again, under President Obama, with dropping the prohibition in the military and protecting in other areas in the law for health issues and voting rights issues and everything, is just so amazing. The challenge that transgender people go through makes coming out as a gay man insignificant. Seriously, it was a big deal to me to come out as a gay man. I mean, it's everything. It was everything. It was crazy. And as I look back 40 plus years later, I go, wow, that was nothing. I never had to deal with how my driver's license read or looked, my sexual identity, male, female. I mean, I never thought about the challenges that a transgender person. It's been an incredible education for me.
It's humbling. Yeah.
I am pleased and honored to say that I know a lot of transgender people who are friends, and I know they count me among their friends as well. I know that sounds patronizing, but it's really true. I mean, and just really, really thrilled and glad that the movement progressed to that point. Come out wherever you are. I would say, I think coming out is probably the single most important thing that they can do for themselves. And they shouldn't do it for anybody else. But they will find, maybe not in advance, but certainly after the fact, that it was, as I found, the most important thing you could do for your own physical and mental health and your own freedom of being. And I think that it's always important for each person to assess the environment in which they live and exist, school, work, their house of worship, home, and family, and be able to know that if they come out, that they have a refuge somewhere, if it doesn't go great somewhere else. Because nobody wants to voluntarily subject themselves to be kicked out of their house as a teenager or find themselves out of work as a young adult. But a lot of those fears are self-imposed. They're not necessarily there. And so I would suggest get some therapy, get some help about that. Your local gay and lesbian center, LGBT center, will have a lot of information about that. I know the Human Rights Campaign has National Coming Out Day and lots of materials around that, all available online, hrc.org. And I think that it's an old joke that we do know that the anti-LGBTQ movement is generational. We know that the older people are not as understanding and accepting as the younger people. So there's a terrible, inappropriate old joke that I love to quote, and that is that we're just one good flu season away from full equality.
Oh my God, okay, awesome. Thank you so much.